London, 1720. Sir Isaac Newton, the most famous scientist in Europe, stands in the middle of a financial storm. Only months earlier, he'd made a tidy fortune on shares of the South Sea Company. He had bought in early, watched the price soar, then sold for a very satisfying profit. For a brief moment, it looked like Newton had mastered not just the motion of planets, but the motion of markets too. Then the price kept rising. Friends and colleagues bragged about their spectacular gains. Coffee houses buzzed with talk that the South Sea Company would make everyone rich. Newton, watching from the sidelines, faced a choice: stay out and risk missing the greatest money-making opportunity of his life, or jump back in. This time, he put far more on the line. When the bubble burst, he lost what would today be worth millions. Later, people would link him to a bitter line: I can calculate the motions of the heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people. So how did a farmer's son become one of Britain's richest minds? And what can his fortune and his failures tell us about the birth of modern capitalism? Our story begins in a stone farmhouse in Woolsthorpe, Lincolnshire, in 1642. Isaac Newton is born into a world of civil war and political chaos. His father, a small landowner, dies before Isaac is even born. His mother remarries and moves away, leaving the boy to be raised by his grandparents. Newton grows up quiet, solitary, and intensely inward-looking. Instead of playing with other children, he builds things: sundials, mechanical toys, and little devices that show an early fascination with how the world works. For a boy of his background, the expected path is simple: farming, local responsibilities, and a life that never strays far from the village. But one schoolmaster notices that this thin, withdrawn child has an extraordinary mind. Relatives, instead of dragging him back to the farm, allow him to stay in school. He studies at Grantham, then makes a huge leap: admission to Trinity College, Cambridge. At Cambridge, Newton is not a gentleman of means. He is a sizar, a kind of scholarship student who pays his way by serving richer students, waiting on tables, doing odd jobs, living modestly. He eats at the lower tables and stays in plain rooms. Yet he now has something far more valuable than comfort: access to a great library, the latest books, and some of the best minds in Europe. He absorbs everything: philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, then starts to push beyond it. In the 1660s and 1670s, Newton's world explodes with ideas. He studies Descartes, Kepler, and Galileo, and quietly begins to surpass them. During a plague outbreak, when Cambridge closes, he returns to Woolsthorpe and does some of his most important thinking. In this relative isolation, he lays the groundwork for calculus, develops new ideas on motion, and starts forming the concept of universal gravitation. The famous apple story, whether literally true or not, captures this period when he begins to see a single set of laws tying the heavens and the earth together. But at this stage, none of that genius pays particularly well. Back at Cambridge, Newton becomes Lucasian Professor of Mathematics, one of the most prestigious academic positions in England. It gives him status and a steady income, but not serious wealth. He lectures, experiments with lenses and prisms, and publishes work on optics that makes him a star within the scientific community, especially at the Royal Society in London. The turning point for his public reputation comes with the publication of Philosophia Naturalis, Principia Mathematica, the Principia, in 1687. In it, Newton sets out his laws of motion and the law of universal gravitation, providing a framework that explains everything from falling objects to planetary orbits. The Principia doesn't make him rich, but it makes him something almost as valuable in the 17th century, indispensable. Patrons like Edmund Halley help fund the work, and members of the political elite notice him. His name now carries weight in circles where decisions about money, war, and empire are made. Britain is changing too. After the Glorious Revolution, Parliament grows in power, the national debt expands, and new financial institutions emerge. Knowledge, especially technical and mathematical knowledge, becomes a form of political capital. Newton is perfectly positioned to turn his genius into influence and income. That chance comes in 1696, when he's offered the job of Warden of the Royal Mint in London. On the surface, it's a role about supervising coin production. In reality, it's a political appointment at the heart of England's financial system. At first, Newton hesitates. Taking the job means leaving behind his quiet academic life at Cambridge. But the pull of London and the scale of the opportunity is too strong. He accepts. When Newton arrives, England's currency is in crisis. Silver coins have been clipped and shaved so often that many are underweight. Counterfeiters thrive. People hoard good coins and spend the bad ones. Confidence in money itself is evaporating. Newton attacks the problem with the same relentless focus he once gave to prisms and equations. He personally interrogates suspected counterfeiters, examines coinage, and helps lead the Great Recoinage, a massive operation to replace old, unreliable coins with new ones. 3 years later, he is promoted to Master of the Mint. That promotion is the true turning point in his personal finances. The job comes with a solid salary, but the real riches lie in the fees tied to coin production. In some years, Newton earns around $2,000, around 20 times what he made as a Cambridge professor. This income puts him in the top tier of English earners, close to the wealthiest professionals and merchants. He also plays a role in setting the gold-silver ratio used in coinage. Some historians argue that his decisions nudged Britain toward a de facto gold standard, shaping the future of international finance. Whether or not that was his intention, the effect is clear. Newton is now not only explaining the universe, he is helping to define the value of money in one of Europe's rising powers. With his new wealth and position, Newton transforms from isolated scholar into London gentleman. He buys a comfortable house, hires servants, and moves in circles that include politicians, bankers, and leading merchants. Coffeehouses and clubs are the social media of the age, places where news spreads, deals are floated, and financial gossip fills the air. Joint stock companies, government bonds, and overseas trade ventures are the hottest topics in town. Newton doesn't just watch, he participates. He directs his growing income into investments. He buys government bonds, which provide regular interest payments backed by the state. He purchases shares in the Bank of England and the East India Company, central pillars of Britain's emerging financial empire. Over time, the dividends from his investments become substantial, reportedly more than $1,000 a year by the late 1710s. Combined with his mint salary, this makes him not just comfortable, but genuinely rich. By all appearances, Newton is a rational, prudent investor. He focuses on serious institutions, not wild schemes. His portfolio is diversified. He is exactly the kind of person we imagine when we think of smart money. But early 18th century London is also full of projectors, promoters of speculative ventures promising incredible returns. The line between solid investment and dangerous speculation is blurry, and no amount of intelligence can entirely protect someone from the mood of the crowd. Into this environment steps the South Sea Company. The South Sea Company is launched with a seductive idea. It will take on a large portion of Britain's national debt in exchange for trading privileges in the South Seas, mainly Spanish territories in the Americas, including involvement in the slave trade. In theory, it will make enormous profits from this exclusive access. In practice, much of its business is financial engineering, swapping government debt for company shares, restructuring obligations, and selling the dream of future riches. By 1720, the scheme has ignited a full-scale mania. The company's insiders, backed by political connections, push the stock aggressively. Pamphlets describe limitless opportunities across the ocean. The price of South Sea shares climbs and climbs. New money floods in. Ordinary people, aristocrats, and seasoned investors alike scramble to participate. Newton is among those drawn in, but at first he behaves exactly as a cautious investor should. He buys shares early, watches the value rise, and then sells for a very handsome profit. At that point, he could have walked away as one of the great winners of the bubble. But the price keeps going up. As the stock soars, people all around him boast of life-changing gains. The pressure is not just financial, but social. Nobody wants to be the one who left too early. Newton, despite his extraordinary ability to stand apart when doing science, finds it harder to stand apart from the market euphoria. He decides to re-enter the South Sea trade, but now at much higher prices and with far more money at stake. When the bubble finally bursts, the fall is swift and devastating. The share price collapses, fortunes evaporate, political careers are destroyed. Newton is not spared. Later estimates suggest he loses between 10,000 and 20,000, a massive hit and a large portion of his liquid wealth. Whether or not he ever said the famous line about the madness of people, the sentiment fits. The greatest calculator of his age has been outmatched by human emotion and herd behavior. Yet the South Sea bubble does not ruin Isaac Newton. Unlike many smaller investors who are wiped out, Newton still has substantial assets. He remains master of the mint with its generous income. Not all of his investments were in South Sea stock. He continues to hold land, government bonds, and shares in more stable organizations. Over time, these holdings help him recover. The bubble leaves a scar, but not a crater. In his later years, Newton lives as a wealthy, respected gentleman. He serves as president of the Royal Society, overseeing the scientific life of the nation. He has been knighted and enjoys a social standing that would have been unimaginable for the boy from Woolsthorpe. He spends money on books, art, and the maintenance of his properties, including a country residence at Cranberry Park. His life is not one of wild luxury, but of steady comfort and high status. When he dies in 1727, his estate is valued at about $30,000. For someone who did not come from the top aristocracy and never married into wealth, this is an enormous sum. Converted into modern terms, it easily places him in the multi-millionaire range. A common myth claims that Newton died poor because of the South Sea disaster. The figures tell a different story. He died rich, just not as rich as he might have been had he resisted the urge to chase the final phase of the bubble. Isaac Newton's life is usually told as the story of pure intellect, the falling apple, the laws of motion, the equations that reshaped physics. But his financial life tells an equally important story about the rise of modern capitalism. As master of the mint and a major investor, he shows how scientific prestige can be converted into political power and real wealth. As a victim of the South Sea bubble, he shows how even the most brilliant mind can be swept up in speculative fever. In that sense, Newton really was Britain's richest mind. Few thinkers have ever turned their genius into such influence and fortune. But his experience also warns us that intelligence alone cannot shield us from markets, crowds, or our own emotions. The same man who could model the orbits of planets could still misjudge the trajectory of a stock. For investors and innovators today, his story leaves a simple, humbling question. If someone as brilliant as Isaac Newton could be humbled by a financial bubble, what truly protects modern investors? Better information, stronger regulation, or personal discipline?